Today we're going to explore the recent statistics and just the overall play of one Simone Fontecchio. Now, for those that remember, he did start out the season playing for the Utah Jazz, as he ended last season playing with the Utah Jazz, being brought over from the EuroLeague as the Italian sensation. We ended up coming across a stage in Utah Jazz basketball history where you saw a culmination of players that originally were expected to be a dumpster fire of a team play actually very, very well together. Credit to Will Hardy and that coaching staff for putting them in positions to win and finally figuring out who were the proper cogs in the machine to make that team go. We saw that team reel off 15 wins out of 19 games in a stretch. And honestly, it was some of the best basketball and the greatest chemistry we've seen on a basketball court, bar very few teams in recent NBA history. It was a team where you saw a lot of guys that were not the most elite at their particular position, but they just played so well off of each other and within Will Hardy's system that it allowed the team to overachieve what most people ever expected them to be able to. And Fontecchio was a core part of that. We're going to go ahead and see what he's doing now with the Pistons and go ahead and recap just how great of a player he was for the Utah Jazz. As always, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. Thanks for tuning in this one. Go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you like NBA content. That being said, let's go ahead and get into this one. Simone Fontecchio was a star that just needed a little bit of extra time to cook. Obviously, his first season with the Utah Jazz, he only played in 52 games. He started in 6 of them, averaging a total of 14.5 minutes. Now, he shot 36.9% from the field and 33% from 3, while shooting 79.5% from the free throw line. Admittedly, those numbers don't really sound well, and it doesn't get better when you say that he averaged 6.3 points to go along with 1.7 rebounds and 0.8 assists. With that being the general understanding, the question is, how did he make the jump, and what context allows us to understand exactly the type of player he is? Well, he was a EuroLeague guy. In the EuroLeague, the game is different. The game is a lot slower. There's a lot more physicality, and it's less focused on transition offense, and it's more so geared towards the plays and the nuanced values of the game that made a lot of people fall in love with the game of basketball to begin with. Fontecchio has been a superb shooter. Obviously, coming over here, he was regarded as one of the greatest small forwards that was available in the open market to be brought over into the NBA game. His first season with the Utah Jazz was rocky because he had to make the transition from the EuroLeague playstyle to the NBA playstyle simultaneously while battling through several injuries that kept him in and out of the lineup at different points in time. Because of that, his shooting splits were not particularly the greatest, and at the time there were a bunch of other pieces and moving cogs in the machine that made more sense to play at times than he did. Coming into this season, he saw opportunities like no other. It actually started at one point when Lauri Markkanen went down with injury. At the time, there were many players at the team that were just here to play. We saw this team being projected to be a very sorry NBA team this year, and honestly a team that nobody was really going to be worried about when you came in. It was basically free eats for most opposing teams, at the very least according to NBA analysts. Enter Fontecchio stepping his game up and having the opportunity because Lauri Markkanen went down, alongside the uncanny duo of Chris Dunn and Colin Sexton being bumped up into the starting lineup, and you saw the team do an entire 180 from where they started out the first 25-ish games of the season. Fontecchio with the Utah Jazz played in a total of 50 games before the trade and started in 34 of them. Now, he averaged 23.2 minutes and shot 45% from the field, which is almost a 10% increase from the previous year, and shot 39% from 3 on 4.7 attempts, which is again 6% up from the previous year, and honestly made him one of the premier marksmen at the small forward position. He also shot 80% from the free throw line on roughly the same number of attempts as last year, but the difference was night and day. He ended up averaging 8.9 points to go along with 3.5 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 0.6 steals, 0.2 blocks, and just 1 turnover on a nightly basis. And the biggest thing that you could see was different between his game last year and this season was the simple fact that he appeared to want it more. He appeared to be in more comfortable positions with his self within the offense and on defense, because a lot of people's had main gripes with him being he could not defend very many people. He put in a lot of work this offseason. He understood the playbook. He understood his assignments. And out this year, we saw him play like a man possessed. Not only was he marking down his threes, showing that sneaky athleticism that a lot of people don't actually recognize that he has, but he was also doing all the little things. He was making the necessary plays on defense to get a steal, to get his hand in a passing lane, to even occasionally play some great help side defense and get a block here and there. But more than that, on offense, you saw him in situations where he was rebounding. He was making that extra pass. And when his shot wasn't falling, he wasn't willing to be a detriment to his team and continue to shoot the rock. You would see him recognize once he goes 1 for 4, 1 for 5, that tonight might not be his shooting night. And so when he would find an open teammate, instead of taking that shot himself, even though he was recognized as one of the best shooters on this roster, he would pass it up and give somebody else the opportunity to make a play. And honestly, that was one of those important things that helped this team achieve a lot more earlier on in the season before the trade deadline than a lot of people originally anticipated that they would. There was no selfish ball. It was very egoless, and Fontecchio was the perfect face of everything this team embodied at the time. Unfortunately, though, with his contract coming up to be an expiring one, and the fact that so many teams would actually be willing to pay out a significant amount of money just to get him, Danny Ainge found himself in a situation where he didn't feel comfortable going ahead and re-signing him, considering at the same time he is in his latter 20s at 28 years old at the moment, and he felt as though because so many teams would have been in the running for him, and because the rookies needed some more time to play, it was in the best interest for the Utah Jazz in the long term to go ahead and let him walk. But you don't want him to walk for anything, because at the end of the day, Fontecchio was a phenomenal player and he was a very big catalyst for the success that the team saw coming into the trade deadline. So they sent him to the Pistons. The Pistons obviously were known as being a dumpster fire organization over the past couple of years, but they needed somebody to help them get boosted over the edge and just become a more competent organization. They said they wanted Fontecchio. They felt like he could be a very big cornerstone piece for them in these upcoming seasons, considering they still do have Cade Cunningham, they still have Jaden Ivey, and they still have several other pieces, but they moved a lot of guys at the trade deadline. Now, Fontecchio came in exchange for Gabriel Prajita, as well as a second-round draft pick to go along with Kevin Knox as well. Even though Kevin Knox ended up getting bought out, it was still a positive trade for the Utah Jazz because they did end up getting extra draft capital for him, and they were able to put him in a position to where he could be successful on his own, despite the fact that he was now going to have to find his way in a new team system. Even more than that, it allowed guys like Taylor Hendricks and Bryce Sensabaugh now to end up in a position where they're starting most of the games for the remainder of the season and really getting to test and show their mettle against the NBA's best players. With the Detroit Pistons since the trade deadline, we've seen Fontecchio go absolutely nuclear. He's found himself in a situation where not only has he been able to start games for them, but he's also been able to put up substantial point totals and actually affect their win-loss categories. He found himself in a situation where Detroit needed him to start right away and really just get some burn, get acclimated to the system, and show them the production that they believed that he had from the start, and he has not disappointed in the slightest. Italy's finest in the NBA has stepped up to the plate in all metrical categories and honestly outplayed himself even when he was with the Utah Jazz as a starter. He's currently playing 29.9 minutes per game. He started in 8 out of the 15 games that he played with the Detroit Pistons and has upped his overall field goal attempts by 4 up to almost 12 a game, shooting 48.3% from the field and 43.6% from 3 on roughly 1.5 more attempts from 3, shooting 6.3 of them per game. He also upped his free throw percentage to 84%, up from 80%, averaging 4% higher shooting with the Detroit Pistons on 1 more free throw per game. He also upped his rebounds from 3.5 to 4.1 and his assists from 1.5 up to 1.7. His steals went from 0.6 to 0.9 and his blocks have dipped a little bit from 0.4 to 0.2, but his turnovers have only increased by 0.1, putting him at 1.1 for them overall. And really the most obvious thing that most people tend to pay attention to when you watch an NBA game is how many points did he score? Well, he went from 8.9 with the Utah Jazz in 50 games to 15.6 with the Detroit Pistons over 15. And while that won't ultimately skew his numbers and make him appear to be an elite player at the small forward spot, he's really being able to showcase his game in the best opportunities available for him. At 6'7" and 209 pounds listed, he's really been able to step out of his comfort zone and show himself to the NBA world, and even more than that, show that EuroLeague players can make the transition and really be a poster child for the Italian league players that are planning on making those jumps into the EuroLeague and have even aspirations of making it to the NBA. Mind you, last year he was shooting 37% from the field and 33% from three. Then this season he went up to 45% from the field and 39% from three. Then we traded him, and on an increased role with higher expectations than ever before, he upped his percentages again to 48.3% from the field and 43.5% from the three-point line on 6.5 attempts per game. Fontecchio is an NBA mainstay at this point, and I believe that with the Pistons, he will have the opportunity to reach new heights that he originally was not going to end up being able to experience as simply a cog in the machine for the Utah Jazz. And even though he will be missed by the Utah Jazz faithful and the players as well as the organizational core members alike, I believe that this was the best thing that could have happened to him for his career in the long term. In the long run, it probably doesn't affect the Utah Jazz as much as the fan base felt hurt by it in the way that it affected the remainder of this season. With that being said, let me know your opinions on Fontecchio. Let me know what you think the height of his NBA career will look like, despite the fact that he is in the latter half of his 20s. He really is just entering his prime as a player in the game of basketball to begin with, so there could be another gear even above this one. But that's up to you guys to decide. As always, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. Thanks for tuning in this video. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on post notifications, and become a member to help support the content. With that being said, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you are on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.